Friends, good evening to you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
It's a joy to see you all today. I want to let you know I only sent out one link, and that's the way it will be with each of these. I will send you one link, and the session will just roll right into the second session. If you don't join the first one, that's fine. You can just join what is already in progress, and we will pick up the second session at 7:30 to 8:30. What I normally do is I provide a presentation the first 30 minutes, and then I open it up for discussion and your contribution in the second 30 minutes. And that's what we will do this evening as well. Do want to introduce you to someone this evening that is a very special person to me. She is joining us this evening from South Carolina, and that is my very good friend, Lisa Judd. Lisa Judd is the Certified Lay Ministries Director in South Carolina, and they have been running a flourishing program now for a couple of years. And when I got pegged to lead this one last January, I had no clue where to begin. And I don't know where I would be today if it weren't for my good friend Lisa Judd from South Carolina. She has been a tremendous help to us getting our program started. And she attended the refresher session at Mount Pleasant that Earl and Cliff led last May. And they got to meet her in person there. Of course, Earl is a delegate to General Conference for North Carolina. Lisa is a delegate to General Conference for South Carolina, and they will see each other in Africa.
Yes.
But it is an absolute joy to have her with us this evening, and she wanted to see how we are presenting these sessions. We are calling these sessions Church Leadership and Administration. And we told people who were interested in getting credit that if you attended all 7 sessions, that you could get credits in what we're calling Church Leadership and Administration. And so tonight is the second of those sessions. And tonight we're going to be talking about what is a lay leader in the first session, and then what is church council in the second session. But before we dive in, Lisa, did you want to say anything this evening before we jump into this and say hello to the folks that are with us this evening?
Hello, everyone. I'm coming from the upstate of South Carolina, and we have such beautiful weather here, as I'm sure that y'all do in North Carolina. It's been great working with Steve to work on some of these classes and share our knowledge. As you all know, it's better to work together and instead of just by yourself on things because you don't think of things. You don't think of everything. So I've enjoyed working with Steve and meeting Earl and Cliff and the ladies who were at my table at that meeting. It was really nice. So I appreciate Steve allowing me to sit in on this so that I think maybe our program can learn from y'all's. We've not developed this class yet, so this may be something that I can take back to South Carolina. In addition, I'm on the Global Methodist Church Commission on Higher Education, Ministry and Higher Education, and I am over the curriculum work group for that. So the work that Steve has done here for this class, I may take it to the general church level and present it as maybe a structure for what we would propose that the whole conference or the whole church do. So I appreciate being allowed to be here.
Well, it is a joy to have you. And my right hand in this program is Dottie Brogdon. I don't know if you have met her yet or gotten acquainted with her yet, But Dottie, welcome back. I know you guys took a little adventure out to the mountains. It's good to see that you made it back safe. Did you want to say a word about what's coming up in November with Richard Booker's Mission and Evangelism course and the enrollment for that, which should be available very, very soon?
It is actually online on the conference website. If you go to, oh goodness, it's like the fourth or fifth tab over, but anyway, you go down to events and it is there. So we have that registration open. Richard's classes are going to be the first 4 Saturdays in November from 9 to 11 a.m. And we hope that you'll get registered soon. I'll also do a plug for the convocations and convocation, the last one that's going to be held in Greenville, North Carolina on October the 25th. Registration for that is due by next Monday so that they can count heads for lunch. So if you're in the eastern part of the state, please consider going to that. Cliff's class is going well as far as I know, and I missed that on Sunday, so I got some catching up myself to do. But anyway, welcome Lisa too.
Well, thank you for that update. And yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and we're real excited about it. A lot of moving parts these days, but we hope that you can dive into Richard's class and certainly the upcoming lay convocation. It is the last of 3 that have been presented, and those other 2 were very successful, and we're looking forward to this next one. I have mentioned to you, and I sent a link for the book that I would highly recommend for this class. I've been sending you readings for this class, but if there was something that you wanted to add to your library, I've tried to conserve the cost and what expenses we're putting on you. So I haven't asked you to purchase a book for this class. But if you are interested in what I think would be a very informative resource for this topic, and that I think you would benefit from and thoroughly enjoy, is this book, Leadership the Wesleyan Way. It came out about 10 years ago, and it has 32 chapters in it. 32 different contributors contributed to this book. And the chapters are no more than 10 pages each. It's concisely written, but each of the contributors take different facets of a jewel. And you talk about analyzing and assessing every aspect of Wesleyan leadership that you could imagine. This book does it, and it does it wonderfully, and you would benefit tremendously by looking at all the aspects that Wesleyan leadership informs and empowers in our church work and even beyond church work in terms of our social and cultural impact. It discusses how to think of leadership as a distinctive Wesleyan, which is what we're wanting to empower you to do. I sent the presentation notes to you, and I don't have any desire to rehearse those verbatim, but I do desire for you to go through those and read through those. And I also sent you the respective readings that apply to what it means to be a lay leader in the Book of Doctrines and Discipline, section 442, page 47 through 48, and the section 502 on what a certified lay minister is, page 62 and 63. That is in the Book of Doctrine and Discipline, and I would highly recommend that you refer to those chapters and refer to those sections, because it will give you the detailed description of how the denomination is defining the aspects of what it means to be a lay leader. What I want to give for you this evening is a mindset. I want to establish within you, as you carry into the task of serving as a lay leader, how to think of your work and how to cultivate for yourself an identity. because more than the nuts and bolts of what you do is to ground yourself in who you are. Who are you as a distinctive Wesleyan leader? Well, let me tell you right from the start that you would put yourself in the legacy of people like Thomas Maxfield and Mary Fletcher, who are legendary in Wesleyan history as two significant contributors to Wesleyan church history that contributed as not clergy, but as people who were devoted and dedicated lay people. 18th century Methodism, no matter how you size it up, was largely a lay movement. Read the history about it, and there is no dispute about it that it was largely a lay driven movement. And the reason for that was that Wesley was thoroughly convinced when scripture tells us that we are a kingdom of priests. He took that for its word. And he believed that that not only meant people who were specialized as ordained clergy, but that all people who are redeemed by Christ and possessing of Christ's Spirit are gifted to serve within the kingdom of priests. And so, as Wesley was itinerating lay preachers, he assigned them in pairs in the British Isles. And then later, when the Methodist movement came to America, he assigned lay people in pairs in America. And what made the movement so unique was that it was systematic, it was carefully structured, it was meticulously networked, and this made Wesley unique, unique for church history, because no one up until the time of John Wesley had ever done this. And even we're talking about the itinerating people that Wesley sent out, but that doesn't even include the non-itinerating people that Wesley put to task of ministry, whether they were serving various societies, whether they were serving classes, whether they were serving bands. And of course, Wesley had already taken a great deal of criticism because of his field preaching. Anglicans were critical of Wesley because they thought it was undignified for him to take the sophistication of preaching and proclamation out of the sanctuary and into the fields. They thought that was undignified. But Wesley would identify with David's words after David had danced through the streets, and his wife, who was the daughter of Saul, you'll recall, told him that she thought that was undignified of him, that that was unbecoming of him to dance the way that he did through the streets. And remember what David said to her. He said that you're getting ready to see even things that are going to be even more undignified than this. And that's what Wesley said. His identity was that I am going to follow scripture, and whether you think it's undignified or not really doesn't in any way bother me or change my attitude toward what I think scripture calls us to. So he was accused of being undignified because he took the gospel into the fields, but then he was also considered undignified in the way that he put lay people to task. Wesley thought that it was indeed a risk for pastors to be viewed as professionals, whereas laity just tends to be viewed as passive recipients who are spectators. They're just there to observe. Wesley thought this is not at all what I see in scripture. And if you were to adopt this mindset, which he believed was unintentionally adopted in the Anglican Church, whether they intended it or not, that it lulled lay people into passivity and into complacency. They were lulled into an apathy by no fault of their own, but imposed upon them to suggest that they were unqualified and incapable to do the work, when Wesley thought if they are gifted, then they are qualified, and they are made capable. I think one of the most astounding passages in all of Scripture, and it would make a wonderful trivia question, is to ask who are the first people in Scripture to receive the Holy Spirit and to be possessed by the Holy Spirit. Who are the first people in Scripture? Well, you're thinking maybe it's Moses, maybe it's Joshua. Your mind takes you back. Maybe it's even Aaron the priest. It is none of those. It is two obscure figures named Bezalel and Aholiab in Exodus 31. They are the first two that Scripture says was possessed by the Holy Spirit and gifted, and they were gifted in order to build the tabernacle. Bezalel and Aholiab were empowered and inspired as lay people, not priests, to build the holy sacred work of God's tabernacle. And it says that God filled them with giftedness in order to do that. So Wesley, looking at things like that, thought that we would be contrary to Scripture if we disputed that lay people are incapable and unqualified and ungifted to serve. They are gifted and they are capable and they are inspired and empowered and given the skills to accomplish the Lord's work. Now, one thing I sent you this week that I found incredibly profound. I don't know if a Wesleyan was the author, but it was the article from Forbes magazine that I sent you that was entitled 20 Telltale Signs That Someone Isn't Ready for Leadership. I hope you read that article because it was indeed fascinating, and it would behoove us to rehearse those 20 things because I think Wesley would have found them indeed provocative. Remember, the first one on the list was a person that is concerned more with personal wins. They're concerned more with personal wins. You identify a person like that in your congregation, I would hope that you wouldn't nominate them to become a lay leader. If they're more interested in personal wins, then they have an issue right away that is unqualified for the work that God is calling us to. The second thing on the list to remember is that they do not embrace accountability. That is another area that this is Forbes magazine, mind you, a secular business magazine. If a person does not embrace accountability, that's not a person you want leading your organization. You don't want them leading a committee. You don't want them leading a class, a band, a society. You don't want them leading a small group. If they only see the small picture and nothing more, that's another strike against their qualification. If they lack self-leadership, then it's hardly a sign that if they are incapable of self-leadership, that they're incapable of leading anyone else. What about the person who is interested in promotion, but they're not interested in responsibility? Boy, that sounds like a Wesleyan critique, doesn't it? What about the person that leads from their insecurity? That's not a person that is going to be composed or grounded or anchored in the way that a leader needs to be. What about a person that might be an expert in something, but they might not be right for leadership? I have found as I talk to people across the denominational lines and even within our denomination, I'm somewhat astounded at how churches sometimes elect their lay leaders. They will think to themselves, well, because this person was a good lawyer in the secular world, let's put them to work as a lay leader in church. Or if they led a business, that might mean that they could lead a church denomination, or they could be a leader at our congregation. Maybe this person, because they were gifted as being a school principal, maybe we could put them to work in being a lay leader and let them lead church council and let them be a part of the SBRC and the finance and the nominations group. A person may be an expert in one field, but that necessarily does not qualify them for the kind of skill set that is uniquely distinguished for leadership. And it's certainly the case, as we see in number 8, a person that fails to understand when to speak and when to listen. That is another area of significant concern that would strike a person as maybe not ready for leadership. They need to be more grounded. What about the person who wants and desires to be the smartest person in the room? That seems to be their primary concern. They mistake leadership as having to be the visible, recognized smartest person in the room. Once again, you're not going to be dealing with a person who is very secure in their own identity. What about number 10? A person who is not interested in feedback. They avoid it, they resist it, they're terrified of it. It's not a person that would be really qualified for leadership. These are secular lists, mind you, but Wesley would say they are right on target, each and every one of them. What about number 11 in that list? No interest beyond the role that they see. No interest beyond their role. They take no interest in the grand scheme of what is going on and how all of these moving parts in the church fit together and work together to produce a well-designed engine. Person is not interested in the grand scheme, then that is not really the kind of person you want serving as a lay leader. What about the person that's not interested in building teams? What about the person that's not interested in building groups and networking within the church, recognizing and discovering the gifts around them, even if they think that those gifts might even be more noticeable than their own? Do they have the humility to be able to endorse those kind of people? What about the person that is maybe excelling at one thing, but they are not exactly talented at leadership? They might be excelling at a number of different things. You can use them. They might be a good Sunday school teacher. They might be a person that is gifted in doing something with the trustees. They might be a person gifted with being a counter in your church and handling money. But when you identify a person as a lay leader, you're looking at a very specific and distinctive skill set. What about the person that is always desirous and needful of validation? That they've got to have validation in order to function. May not be the kind of person that is right for leadership. What about the person, as we saw, that was critical during disaffiliation? They refuse and avoid and resist tough conversations. We found that it was not only churches that had cowardly pastors that refused to discuss things, it was also churches that had cowardly lay people that refused to have tough conversations. And they would tell you later, we're Orthodox. We didn't want to remain where we were, but nobody had the courage to speak up. When you nominate a person as a lay leader, you are nominating a person that you know has the courage to represent their testimony and to share their witness unashamedly. What about the person that ignores the impact of their decisions? What about the person that ignores the impact of the things they say? You have a gossiper. You have a person that tends to talk about others in the church, and they don't have a real sense of how their behavior impacts and leaves behind an imprint. Not the kind of person that wants to be serving in leadership. What about the person that lacks people skills? What about the person that puts self over service? What about the person that lacks the service mindset? And what about the person who is more interested in being right in an argument than learning how to be effective? That list of 20 in Forbes magazine, 20 telltale signs that someone isn't ready for leadership. I commend that list to you. And as we enter this season of Charge Conference and your churches are thinking about who they may nominate for leaders, you want to peruse that list and give it careful attention, because the people that you nominate into these roles, they need to be the kind of people that could withstand the evaluation of those 20 categories. When Wesley set out to place people in classes, in bands, in societies, he was looking carefully. And it wasn't just for people that he thought was gifted for clergy. He had expectations for the kind of character that he believed was capable of leading people, and whether they were clergy or lay made no difference. Whether they were men or women, to John Wesley, made no difference. If they had gifts for witness, for nurture, for mentoring, for service, for testimony, for proclamation, I want you to understand how radical this was for the 18th century, for the way that Wesley took this in a direction that was unprecedented for its time. And when you consider what a lay leader is within our own community, it is a critical position, because this person is going to be on church council, on finance, on the nominations team, and on the SPRC, simply because of who they are. They're going to be in all of these vital decision-making functions in the church. And so you're looking at a person who is invested with a great deal of trust. And it is a nomination that cannot come lightly, because so much rides on it. And we saw this during disaffiliation, and we saw it now as we're becoming grounded and established in this new global Methodist community, how vital and how crucial a lay leader is in the congregation. We saw on the disaffiliation side the failure to lead, the failure to speak, the failure to testify, the failure to give witness. It had dreadful implications. And the same holds true in churches that have significant decisions, decisions that affect your future, decisions that affect the legacy of the church, and impact its reputation in the community. These are no small matters. And that's why I pointed out that from our book of doctrines and discipline, a lay leader is going to be chosen from among the people. This person is going to be partners with the pastor. This person is going to be positioned in critical ways in numerous functions across the church. And they're going to be fostering and contributing to your church's vision. That's why it is so important that this person have all of these qualities and these gifts. They may be successful in business. They may have overseen organizations. They may have had expertise in various fields. But when we're looking at the distinctive qualities of spiritual leadership, all of those things need to be a higher priority than making decisions based on a person's secular level of profession. Sometimes you may find that they may be successful in the secular world, but they may not have the right spirit and the right level of maturity to lead in a way that would be effective within the church. Now, one thing I will point out is that people like Lisa and even our own lay representatives who are going to General Conference, one thing that we are urging that these General Conference delegates will promote when they get to Africa is that our discipline is in need of a reconciling work to bring into line sections 442 with section 502. And here's why. Section 502, if you are pursuing certified lay ministry, you will see that it lays out high expectations, as it should. And it lays out requirements that a person needs to meet in order to become a certified lay minister. And the Global Book of Doctrines and Discipline spell those out definitively, and they spell them out clearly. Unfortunately, when you turn back to section 442 and you look at the qualities of a lay leader, it says that it is strongly urged that a person who is elected lay leader in their church pursue education and become a certified lay minister, but it is not required. And I have found, as I'm getting ready to lead charge conferences around my own district, I have found that it is indeed a concern to me when I talk to churches and find out, why does your church not have a person pursuing certified lay ministry? And they will tell me, we're only interested in serving our church. That's all we're interested to do. Now, when we started this program, we were encouraged that we had the number of people participating in it that we did. But count me as overly ambitious or what have you, when we have 400 churches in our conference,
Hey, how are
and
you?
we have
I was just calling about this conference thing he had sent.
60 or
I'm on it.
70 people, someone needs to mute
Yeah, I
their,
didn't get a link.
when you only have less than a fourth signed up to become certified lay ministry, that's concerning to me. It tells me that 3/4 of the people serving churches across North Carolina apparently are only interested in serving their congregations alone. Let me tell you forthrightly that that is not Wesleyan. It is not. Because to be a Wesleyan leader means two things: that there is no holiness but social holiness. And number two, we are devoted to spreading scriptural holiness throughout the land. If you get a layperson in your church who is serving on council, SBRC, finance, and nominations, who has a mentality that I am only interested in my church, then that's not a person that understands social holiness. And it's certainly not a person that understands spreading scriptural holiness throughout the land. And I don't think I'm putting that too mildly. I think I'm putting it exactly the way John and Charles Wesley would put it, that if you are going to be a leader within a Wesleyan community, it has to be social holiness. It has to be spreading scriptural holiness throughout the land. And as long as our book of doctrine and discipline has this tension between section 442 and section 502, then we've got an issue. It gives license and excuse for people not to have a strong enough impetus to say, at the next charge conference, your layperson is going to be asked, what have you done in the last year to increase your education of who you are as a Wesleyan, of your scriptural understanding as a leader, and what your place is in terms of understanding social holiness and what it means to spread scriptural holiness throughout the land. Right now, section 442 does not bring accountability into it that would make a person who is elected a lay leader in their church held accountable to the wider denomination. Right now, it is too easy for a person to be nominated as a lay leader in their church and give exclusive focus only to their congregation without thinking beyond the four walls. And at least they're honest to admit it, because I've had people tell me, I'm only interested in my church. That's why I'm not becoming a certified lay minister. And my first thought is, well, you may not know this, but that is running contradictory to what it means to be a lay leader in the Wesleyan community. One of the first things that it says that we need to do as lay leaders is to acquaint ourselves with the first 24 pages of Book of Doctrines and Discipline. Your lay leader needs to be aware of Wesleyan doctrine, the first 24 pages of our Book of Doctrine and Discipline, and they need to be aware of our social witness. If they read both of those sections in our Book of Doctrines and Discipline, they will see that there is no permission at all to simply focus only on your congregation and nothing more. What is a lay leader? Well, if it's going to be a Wesleyan lay leader, it is without qualification social holiness and spreading scriptural holiness throughout the land. When you become a lay leader, you can be infused and empowered with the knowledge to say, I'm part of a heritage. I'm part of a legacy. I represent something that goes back to the 18th century that was carefully structured and carefully organized and much thought invested into it. That what I represent in this title and in this position is so much more than serving my own congregation. It is representing something bigger than myself and even bigger than my church. I serve a church lowercase c, but I represent a church capital C, a church that has a worldwide reach. I have a local parish, yes, but Wesley was fond of saying, the world is my parish. We need to instill that in our lay leaders. We need to encourage that. And I can't do it enough to elicit within each of you who are listening to this to go back into your churches, to be the sounding of this and to proclaim it, that we've got to restore and reconcile sections 502 and sections 442. As long as being a lay leader under section 442 remains something that is unaccountable and does not hold people's feet to the fire, it's not enough to say it's strongly urged. It must be something that we hold people accountable to in order to bring Section 502 and 442 into a more Wesleyan harmony. Well, there's more that I could say, but I am going to leave it there and I'm going to open it for you to ask questions and to offer your take. What's leaping out at this about what it means to be a lay leader in a Wesleyan community? What inspires you this evening? And by the way, we want to give first opportunity to our certified lay ministry candidates first. The ones who are taking this class for credit, let's give them first opportunity to raise questions and to contribute since they're earning credits from this. Who would like to raise our first question tonight?
Steve, this is Denise Brewster. I would like to ask if a copy of the Book of Discipline and Doctrines has been provided to each lay leader.
It should be. It is available free on the Global Methodist website. That's a good question, Denise. It is, of course, something you can get as hard copy from Seedbed, and some people like hard copy. They like something that they can hold in their hand. I personally printed off the copy off the Global Methodist website. I took it to Staples and I had them make me a nice binder and put it in a ring binder even before the Seedbed hard copy came out. And you can do that too. And it probably will end up costing you about the same. I think I paid about $20 or so for Staples to do that for me, which is about what I think the book cost from Seedbed if you get one from them. But you can read it online too. You don't have to print it out. Just go to the Global Methodist website and click on resources, and you will see the American version, English version of the Book of Doctrine and Discipline. And I, of course, I sent you the sections, the 442 and 502. I sent them to you, to everybody that is signed up tonight. I emailed them to you. I went through the discipline, copied and pasted it to the email I sent you, so you would have it. And they're not long sections, a couple pages each. But the concern that we have, and that I've shared with Lisa and with people in our own conference who will be going, is that we've got to urge in Africa that they reconcile this present inconsistency, because it is inconsistent to allow a person to be nominated as a lay leader in their congregation without a sense of knowing that they're serving something bigger and better and greater and grander than their own individual localized congregation. It is a much larger adventure that we are representing. And we need people to be grounded in that and anchored in that as they work within their own congregations. They'll be even more effective when they realize there is no holiness but social holiness, and that our impetus is to spread scriptural holiness throughout the land. A church is made better with that mentality taking hold in the congregation. Did you have any other questions, Denise, besides that?
I do. This is Dennis.
Yes.
Our lay leader has asked me a couple of years ago, to consider putting a bid in to be the lay leader. At that time, I said, I'm not prepared to do that. I was new to just a year in this church. And I said, I don't know enough yet. Thank you for what you said tonight, because I think at this point I should answer that yes, I'm ready. Where we're at right now, and I've learned so much from you, especially about Wesleyan, that I feel comfortable now.
Well, I appreciate you saying that on a number of levels. What I most appreciate about it is your hesitancy to say, I'm not going to simply jump at this simply because somebody nominates my name. I'm going to honor the Spirit. I'm going to honor how the Spirit is working in my life and magnetically pulling me to the right time and the right way. I think too often we jump into roles simply because we feel like we've been voluntold, and we just do it. And sometimes I think a good leader, as I've often read, their no's will outnumber their yeses. We've got to say our yeses selectively and wisely. And I appreciate that you've given thought to this, you've given care and attention to it, you've given prayerful hesitancy to it. And I think that speaks volumes to your wisdom even before you take the first step into this. And I think that you're doing the right thing. I think that to become acquainted with more is to do exactly what you're doing, is to put yourself out there. And I can say that people like Lisa and I, as we're trying to make these things available, and we're bending over backwards for people to do it. We're making this available to try to say, hey, we're going to make this accessible. We're not going to put burdens on your back that are heavy. We're going to try to do all that we can to make this accessible for you, so that we can bring you into this and equip you and empower you to be effective, to know the community that you're in, and to deepen your identity of who you are. And I think that's so much of what we want to bring to all of these discussions, whether it's council that we'll be doing in the second hour, whether it'll be nominations committee, SBRC next week, or trustees and finance the week after that, is we're trying to ground you with an identity. How are we to view ourselves, and what is the horizon for which we are bringing to this, as to who are we and what are we doing? What really is our ultimate purpose in what we're doing here? And we're not just to jump in and do nuts and bolts. My beef with the Cokesbury books that they often used to print for the UMC was that they just jumped into the nuts and bolts. If you serve on the SBRC, here's what you do. If you serve on trustees, here's what you do. What those books lacked was a strong Wesleyan horizon, that it would deepen your understanding of who am I, what am I about, and what is it exactly that I am positioning myself in. I am positioning myself within a long legacy, a legacy that precedes me and a legacy that will be here long after I'm gone. And I am honored and dignified to be within this kingdom of priests as a royal representative. And I want to know how to do it in a way that really brings integrity to the role. And I think right now, 442 is not enforcing that as strongly as it needs to. It is giving a way out for a person to be nominated by their church, and it never goes further than that. And that is confusing people. It honestly confuses them, because I've had people in certified lay ministry say, I don't get it. I don't get how 442 defines a layperson, and yet 502 has such high expectations of what a certified lay ministry is. Explain to me this gap. It is a gap. And General Conference is the only one that can correct that and resolve it and reconcile it and make 442 a little more like 502. Give it some accountability. Not everybody might need to be a certified lay minister, but everybody needs to pursue education, and everybody needs to be questioned at charge conference. In what way have you done this? I mean, pastors are. And so I think you will give more dignity to lay people. You will raise them and elevate them when we say, brother or sister, we're going to dignify you by putting accountability to this so that your identity will be elevated. And your church, by default, will be elevated as well when we show that this role of a lay leader, it is not just something that is a title, but it represents a high calling that is the prize worth pursuing, where we lay aside all of our weights, and we pursue it with great zeal, and we're not weary in well doing. There is great dignity in it. And what we need to do in section 442 is to give it that substantive accountability that will empower it and bring that accountability factor into it. I wouldn't mind that everybody needs to be certified lay minister, but that might be a tall order. I think at the very least, you could say that charge conference is going to ask, in what way did you pursue education and continued learning? Because our calling as leaders is a lifetime of continued learning. We're asking our pastors this, and Wesley would say, don't put lay people in a different category. Don't insult their dignity. Don't put them in a special corner to say, we don't care if you do continued learning or not. We do care. And we want you to live up to what it means to be a kingdom of priests. We do. Okay. Any more questions with Dennis and Denise? Or did we cover you? Dennis and Denise still with us?
Yes, sir.
So thank you. You answered it well.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. They were very pointed and right on target. Daniel, I believe that you are next. Are you still with us? Can you hear me, Daniel?
Yes, I can hear. I just want to little help on this because one of the words with us tonight asked about the book of discipline. And I search the one you are sending us, your copy from the website of the Global Methodist Church. The reason
That is correct.
the reason I asked because I searched, and tried to print and find one that says the revised 2024 version. I print for my leadership, but when you sent the previous handout for the last session, in this version that I print was not the full version you sent us. So if you, we want to be sure that we have the right link to print the Book of Discipline. I have trouble to find the right one. So
I'll tell you what, after the end of tonight's session, I will email you that direct link for the updated and most recent Book of Doctrine and Discipline. I'll send you that link so that you'll have it. In fact, I'll just send it to the whole class. That's what I'll do. I'll send it to everybody that's enrolled, so all of you will have it. And it'll be really easy for you to connect to, and you'll be able to direct your churches to it so that they can learn about it and see it. And like I say, and I'll tell you what, Lisa is right on it. She's jumping at it for us. Thank you, Lisa. She's going to do it for us. She'll put it in the chat room for us. And have your folks look at that. It's not much to read. As I say, 442 and 502 together is about 4 pages of reading, but it will give you a detailed look. There are some good qualities under 442. There are, But where it is lacking is that it says that continuing education and specifically becoming a certified lay minister is strongly urged. Ooh, well, talk to people and they'll say, is it required? Yes or no? I tell you what, if you can talk about strong urging all you want, if it does not have some measure of accountability, that's what they're going to hear and that's what they're going to decide on. And ultimately, they're going to say it's not required and therefore I will not have to do it. And so we want to dignify people with more than that. If they're going to hold pastors accountable for continuing education, then they need to do equally the same for people who are serving in lay leader roles. That's my humble estimation. Daniel, did you have any other questions, my friend?
No, that's the only comment I have. Thank you.
I think Lisa has already put the link for us in the chat room. I appreciate her doing that. Linda, I believe you're next. What is your question this evening? And Linda, by the way, for those of you who may not know,
Well, Steve, it's really
Linda serves on the board of ministry, so it's very helpful to have her input on this because she'll be serving as the group that will be interviewing certified lay ministry candidates. Yeah. Having said that, Linda, what's your question this evening?
well, it's really, I don't think it's a question, Steve, as much as it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. It's not a question. It's not a question as much as it is a statement. I have talked with Heather, and we've talked about the CLM. And going back to what you said about accountability, I totally agree with everything that you said. The CLM, what I've heard from Heather is that some people are saying, well, I don't want to dive into all that much education and so forth and so on. Whether you are a lay leader or a CLM, it doesn't matter. There should be some classes that you should have to take. There should be some accountability rather than, as you said, Steve, just a title. And if you are not willing to put forth the effort to continue your education and to go to these classes and to learn and to be able to spread the gospel in the Wesleyan way, then I think you need to look in the mirror and question, has God really called you for that position? And when you go before the board of ministry, they are going to drill you on this.
Yeah,
that's right. They're going to ask you to tell your story. How did you come about your faith? How did you come about your calling? And so if you go in there and say, well, I've just been volunteered and no, I'm not taking any classes because it's not required, I can tell you that's not going to look very favorable.
No, it
and
doesn't.
I think your feet you need to be held accountable. You know, if this is your calling that you feel like that you have had, if God is calling you for this, then you should be willing to go the extra step that God is calling you for. Whether it be lay leader or whether it be CLM, there needs to be some accountability.
You're exactly
and I think
right.
the two needs to be clearly defined in our book of discipline. I think
you're right.
The guidelines for the lay leader need to be distinct and they need to be clear. It no question.
You are right on target with that, and I think that is one of the unfortunate inconsistencies in our present book of doctrine and discipline, and that is where I would pinpoint it, is that it lacks accountability under 442 for a person to be a lay leader in their church. And you serve in so many wide areas, as you see by our Book of Doctrines and Discipline. You are on the SBRC, you are on the finance team, you are on church council, you are on the nominations team. I mean, look at how wide ranging that impact and influence is. And if you get a mentality there where other lay people are looking at this person that says, if it's not required, I don't need to do it and don't want to do it and don't desire to do it, where are they going to get the motivation? I think that even if we stop short in saying that if you're going to be a lay leader, certified lay ministry is required, that's a tall order. And I would say that, yeah, it does require a more lengthy investment. But at the very least, we could say there are so many opportunities for continuing learning. Conference by conference, for instance, if one of the schedules in this conference doesn't work out, then you could look at what Lisa's doing in South Carolina, and you could, all of this is transferable conference by conference. If you could look at what they're doing in Trinity, Texas, you can look at what they're doing in the Georgia conference. All of this is interchangeable, and it is transferable. And if you don't even want to do that, Hood Seminary is offering a program in global Methodist education, and you can audit. A person doesn't have to take for elective, they can take it to audit. There are opportunities across the board, numerous ways a person can pursue continuing ed, even if they may not want to be a credentialed lay leader, which does involve more. It does involve a lengthy investment. But as I say, we have tried to make it accessible. We have tried to make it available. We've tried to make it so that people can do it cost effectively. Right now, we're doing our program entirely free. I'm very conscious of how I require things that will limit a person's expense. And we try to do this in a way that's going to invite as many as possible. And yet, when we still hear that people aren't interested because they don't see it as a requirement, I got to look back to section 442 and say, well, until there is a pointed question at charge conference where they're asked, what did you do in the last year to further your education? Then there's no accountability. And they are therefore given the excuse to be isolated, secluded, and insular. And that is absolutely the opposite of everything Wesley represented, not to mention what Scripture itself represents. Let's say, what does Joe and April have for us this evening? What is your question this evening?
Steve, good evening. I'm Joe Pede from Loves Grove Methodist Church. We're up in the Asheboro district in Stanfield, North
Carolina. Yes.
For tonight's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you go to Nashville?
No, I did not.
Are you part of Nashville Methodist?
No, Loves Grove Methodist in Stanfield,
Okay,
North Carolina.
Okay, very good.
County, about
Yes.
20 miles east of Charlotte.
Okay, very good. Yes.
For the purpose of tonight's discussion, for this particular first hour, it appears to me that, and I think you answered the question properly already, but I want to clarify that lay leaders refer to everyone who is in a leadership position on these various committees. Is that correct?
Lay leader would be a distinctive person. It would be a person, it can be a person that is elected, chosen from among the people, and carefully looking at the person's qualification and giftedness. And as I say, as I talk to people, they often look at a very wrong set of criteria. They'll say, oh, this person once ran the Chamber of Commerce. They'd be a wonderful lay leader. Or this person was successful in business, or they were a partner in a law firm. Let's make them a lay leader of our church. That's sometimes the mentality that people use, and that is not the right mentality. Those are certainly gifts, and they may very well help a church in terms of things they can contribute to. But when you're looking at a lay leader, you're looking at spiritual maturity, you're looking at the strength of character and integrity and of those qualities that we saw in Forbes magazine that talk about accountability and the sense of grasping the big picture and the humility to build teams and to surround them people with giftedness, to not be intimidated if they may have people around them that might be more skilled than they are, but they are aware of the needs of a church, and they have just the right temperament and qualification to represent the church in a defined, specific, distinctive role that we call a lay leader. And that person is usually a singular role in the church and carefully decided. Because as I say, they're going to be serving in a number of critical roles across very important, crucial committees within the church. Every person has some form in which they're a leader, but one person will be a singular, distinguished, distinctive lay leader. And that person will be the one that is elected by the church and then ultimately elected at charge conference. You will bring the name of the person and its charge conference where that person will officially be endorsed.
I appreciate you clarifying that. I just would comment also that when you mentioned other people around you having, surrounding you with maybe skills that are far in excess of what you have, I think that's the best case scenario. We all benefit that way.
We do. We absolutely do. And I am building the CLM team, and there are certainly people on that CLM team with more credentials than I have, and I embrace them warmly. Because I know they can contribute to what we're doing. And I think that if you're going to lead in the right way, you've got to be humble enough to do the opposite of what King Saul was when David walked in the room. He immediately tried to push him aside or to hide him or to boost himself or and it was his insecurity that inhibited him from the way he could have utilized David and made his kingdom even better than it was and even better than it could have been. And sometimes insecurity keeps a lay leader from being as effective as they could be because they are afraid of a person that might have a more visible skill set of overshadowing them. You got to get beyond that. You really do. Uh, God is going to give you distinctive gifts that nobody can duplicate. Bezalel didn't worry about Aholiab. Aholiab didn't worry about Bezalel. And think about how those two could have talked themselves out of their giftedness if they thought, I want what Moses has. I want what Joshua has. I want what Aaron has. And until I have what they've got, I don't want to do anything. They would have disqualified themselves from what God was calling them to. Bezalel and Aholiab did what Moses, Aaron, and Joshua could not do. And I think when we embrace that there is going to be giftedness that no one else can do, that we have a distinctive imprint, then I think we will be much more secure in the way that we build teams, and we won't worry about the people that we put around us. I put people on the CLM team that have more credentials than me, but I don't worry about it because I know that there is skill set that God has given to me that they're not going to duplicate. And so I can lead with confidence and I can lead with security, and I can bring these people with high levels of credentials onto the team. One who may even be with us this evening. Is Robert Leslie with us this evening? Is my friend Robert? He's going to be joining us in the second hour. Robert is a friend of mine, and he's going to be a part of the CLM team. He was once an academic dean. And I thought, Robert, you're on my team. I need you, my friend. You've got more qualification than me. You've got more accomplished than me, but I want you on my team because of what you experienced and what you've been able to do in your career. I know that you can contribute a lot. And Robert Leslie. And so a singular, distinctive, distinguishable person is going to be nominated to be your lay leader. Even though there may be a number of people in your church who find creative ways in which they influence people and impact people, but one will represent the role of a lay leader. And it's an elected role. It is a role endorsed at charge conference, and it is a role that has a pronounced function in numerous leadership roles across your church committees. That is indeed critical. That's why I say it's no small matter when you start to think as a church who's going to be your lay leader. Don't begin with who's successful in business and who's successful, being a principal of a school. You begin with who is spiritually mature, who is scripturally grounded, who has a sense of what God is doing in their life. Because as Linda pointed out, that's the questions the Board of Ministry is going to ask when certified lay ministers come. Do you have a sense of your call? Do you have a sense of what God is doing in your life? It's wonderful that you were a partner in a law firm, but what we want to know is, what is God doing in your life? How are you growing? How are you on the way to perfection? You get a person that can articulate those things, you grab a hold of them, because that person is qualified to be your lay leader. Did that answer your question, or do
It
you have
certainly does. I
something else?
appreciate the time.
R. Howard. R. Howard.
Yes, yeah, my name is Robert Howd. I'm with
Yes.
the Core Creek Methodist Church in near Beaufort.
Oh, good.
The only I'm finance. I'm finance, so I'm not a lay leader, but so I kind of enjoy taking classes like this, but I think it's one of they are very, nobody knows about them is what I'm getting at. I went to annual conference last year, and as a substitute, my wife signed up for something she didn't even know what she signed up for, but that's how I learned about these classes. We had our charge conference the other day, and what I got out of it was that, and she said, well, you have to ask for these. It seems to me like if we're trying to be educated and get everybody as educated as possible, the conference ought to be sending it to every member in our church. Every member ought to get the information that these are available. And like I say, as far as I know, I'm the only one in our church that even knows they're available. And I just kind of stumbled on it,
I'm glad you pointed that out. We do have it on our church conference website. It is on our conference Facebook page. It is in the conference newsletter, and at least your pastor gets all this. So here we get something where you got to have to put your pastor's feet to the fire, because we as pastors have a responsibility to convey all of this to our parishioners. We really do. We need to get them plugged into the conference newsletter. We need to get them plugged into the conference resources. Let them be aware of the conference Facebook page and website, because the pastors, they are getting all of this. Every one of them across the conference are getting these resources. The question is, are they communicating this information to their congregation? You just exposed your pastor, and I would say, whoever he or she is, hold their feet to the fire, because they need to do better to communicate to you the resources that are out there, because it is their role to tell you about these resources. They're getting them, they're informed about them. The question is, are they communicating it?
Well, I agree that that's kind of the line of way it goes, but I'm still, if you send it out to every member, and then every member will definitely get it, and a lot will turn it down, and a lot will say no, but
that's true. And I think the only way that the conference could get your email is if your pastor was to send it to us, or to tell you about it.
The conference doesn't know each one of us?
No, absolutely not.
Well,
unless you are, now that we're having our first charge conferences and we're turning this information in, they will have your emails. But getting plugged in and getting this assimilated is really a pastor's role. And I was saying about this day one. When this stuff came on board, I told my lay people, get plugged in, get the newsletter. Here's the Facebook page. Of course, I was one of the administrators of our conference Facebook page. So I was already a promoter of that, because I was behind it. Tom Newman and I.
I'm a member of another organization, the national organization, and it's same way. It's those of you in the ends think everybody knows what you know. but everybody doesn't.
Yeah.
So, and it takes a long time to sift down to the standard guys on the block like me. And like I say, I think I'm the only one that's doing it or anything like that in our church. And anyway, so.
Well, now that you have heard this information, you can be a mouthpiece in your congregation, and that's what it takes. For those who aren't aware of the website or the Facebook page or the conference newsletter, now each of you, even if your pastor is not saying it, you get to be the mouthpiece and you get to tell people what's going on and how they could get plugged in. Of course, like you say, I'm glad you saw our table at annual conference. And that was one way we were able to get the word out there.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have the email access to lay people unless pastors give us that information. The conference won't have it unless they're leaders in charge conferences now getting that information. And now that you are on finance, you're a treasurer, if you're the SBRC chair, trustee chair, various committee chairs, now you will be heard of and they will have your email. But it is
I'm
really
to get stuff now.
It's a pastor's responsibility, and it's people like you who can be the mouthpieces and the people who are the voices sometimes crying in the wilderness. You can tell people what they might not know.
We have a now committee meeting tomorrow morning, and I just have another thing to put on there now.
Fantastic. You're already on the right. You're already on the right path.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
John, what is your question this evening?
Yeah. Hey, Steve, thanks a lot for what you're doing here. You mentioned earlier about reading the first 24 pages of the book of Doctrine and Discipline, which is the doctrinal foundations. Any reason that you said just the first 24 instead of the whole part one?
Well, the first 24 pages is what lays out the fundamental foundation of our Wesleyan heritage and of our orthodoxy. Classical orthodoxy, represented by the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed,
right,
and the Chalcedonian Creed, and there then moves from there to the distinctive Wesleyan elements.
Okay,
and
so
that's the first 24 pages.
Yeah, so that means we're not necessarily looking at the 16 articles then that follow that.
Yeah, that's the first 24 pages. That covers the 16 articles as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want more information, I would highly recommend the annotated catechism by David De Silva. My only knock against it is it's a very small book with very small print. You almost need a magnifying glass to read it, but it's published by Seedbed. And the annotated Global Methodist Catechism is really wonderfully developed and gives you the full spectrum of our Wesleyan heritage and our theological and scriptural
yeah, I've got that book already. Yeah, I've got that.
That's one you can add to your library, and you would definitely benefit from that one. You absolutely would. But it's only the first 24 pages of the book of Doctrine and Discipline that focus on the doctrine. You've got to get the annotated catechism to get the greater detail.
And the reason I was asking is the first 24 pages do not include the 16 articles, and that's why I was asking.
Well, there are some articles within the first 24 pages, but that's the extent of what's in the book of Doctrine and Discipline.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's the extent of it. But if you get the
I'm sorry, it's because your book is printed off, and when you have the hard copy, it's not the first 24 pages. It goes through page 40.
It goes to page 41. Yeah, it goes to page 41 in the hard copy.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. There you go. I'm looking at the electronic copy, and it goes through 24, and the hard copy.
Yeah, I have the hardback. So yeah, thank you.
There you go. There you go.
That clarification.
Yeah. So for your resource, it'd be the first 41 pages in the hard copy, and that would include the articles. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I wish we could say more about what is a lay leader, but let's pause and take a break to about 7:35, and then we will reconvene for what is church council, and we will start the second part of our session this evening. And go ahead, get you a drink, stretch your legs a bit, and we will come back at 7:35. We'll see you then. Right, friends, I think we're ready for our second session this evening.
Second segment this evening. Second segment this evening.
Okay. We're going to begin our reflections on what is church council in the GMC. And
the GMC.
let's see, are you getting an echo? Are we getting an echo?
Yes,
there's
yes.
an echo.
There's people not muted.
Muted. Muted.
All right. I think everybody's muted now. When we ask about Wesley's idea of church council, it is not an accurate question, because Wesley did not have the motivation to start a new denomination. You may find it interesting that all the way up into the end of John Wesley's life, he encouraged people who were attending his sermons and attending his preaching. He encouraged them to attend Anglican communion. He was not fostering a new denomination, even though he was certainly fostering a grassroots movement of sorts. He did not intend for it to become a new denomination. So when we think about what is church council and how we apply these church structures within a parish or within a individual local community congregation, what we're doing is we're taking Wesley's plain account of the people called Methodist, and we're looking at the things in terms of organization, structure, divisions, resource allocation, hierarchy, all the rest of it, that he applied to things like societies, classes, and bands. Societies were kind of the main gatherings of people, and then classes were a smaller group, usually around 12 people, and then bands were an even more intimate group, smaller than that, who would be more intimate in terms of their sharing and in terms of their confessions. So you had the structures of societies, classes, and bands, not congregations as such, but we can apply what he thought in terms of organization, structure, divisions, resource allocation, hierarchy, to the way that we now organize and govern congregations. When you look at the minutes of early conferences, 1744 to 1789, that time frame, were the large minutes like we talked about last week from 1780, you see Wesley talking about things rather in terms of area of size or whatever. He talks about the importance of strategy. He talks about the importance of organization, talks about the critical ways in which structure is a part of what we do. And so when we apply that to church governance and church organization, church council is going to be the administrative body of the local church. It's going to give overall leadership, direction, and coordination to the life of a congregation. As I said and illustrated in the notes I sent you, a good illustration would be to think of it as the captain's bridge on a great ship. You got the crew that is rowing, you got engineers stoking the fire, but somebody's got to look at the compass. Somebody's got to be checking the charts. Somebody's got to say, this is where navigation takes place. So your council is the navigation room, so to speak. And it is here where you're going to organize and structure the administrative body of your congregation. Now, there are a number of ways you can do this. The Book of Doctrines and Discipline say that you need to have at least 8 on this council, but you can have more than that. Typically, what goes into church council is your lay leader. Of course, we talked about that in the last hour. Your delegate to annual conference lay leader, your treasurer, your SBRC chair, your trustee chair, your finance chair. And then from there, you can begin to think about other forms of leadership in your church, and that may vary from church to church. You may have a worship team, and you could have the chair of that team. You could have an evangelism team, and you could have the chair of that team. You could have a missions team, and you could have the chair of that team. You could have stewardship. You could have an education team with the chair of that team. What you are looking for when you assemble council, as it specifies and describes on pages 48 and 49, this is in the printed version. I don't know what it is in the seedbed hard copy version, but it's under section 443. That's the section you want to look at, and it's only a couple pages, but it gives you some suggestions as to how your church can build this. One thing you may know is that depending on the size of your church, some churches are going toward what they call a one committee governing model. And it would be like council taking care of your entire administrative coordination for the church. And what you would do is you would have a person that represents worship, a person that represents evangelism, a person that represents missions, a person that represents stewardship. You may not have enough people in your church to have teams, but you can have people that specialize in their giftedness to lead those specific areas. For Wesley, it was so important to have coordination, but it was also important to have specialization, to have people with a focused task, something that they are distinctively giving their focus and attention to. And then you bring those people together in the navigation body so that they can coordinate together, and you can bring all of these parts in the grand scheme so that they're all contributing together corporately and collectively. One thing that the Book of Doctrines and Disciplines advises is that it should have good representation of your congregation, a male and female. It should have good representation in terms of racial and ethnicity. If your church has that in the general body, it should express the full range of ages. You should aim to have the full range of ages represented in this decision-making body. And the programs and ministries of the church, whatever form they're taking, regardless of your congregational size, is that they should be represented in this coordinating administrative body. That's what you're aiming for. If your church has multiple worship services, for instance, contemporary, say, for one, traditional for another, then you would have a representative for each of those, so that all aspects of church life are properly represented and properly coordinated so that the entirety is functioning as a whole. You have each specialized part, and they come together and they collectively are coordinating with one another. Now, as I say, Wesley did not intend to start a new denomination. So what we're taking is his structure and organization of societies, classes, and bands, and we're applying it to congregations is what we're doing. And it was interesting for Wesley, even when his movement was outpacing the Anglican structure, and it didn't take long before it outpaced it significantly. He was still insisting strongly and urging his followers to attend Anglican communion. I find that interesting. I think you will too, that he never insisted that they break from the Anglican Church, that they separate from the Anglican Church. He continued to encourage his followers, even as he propelled this movement that was outpacing the Anglican structure itself. he encouraged them to remain connected, even all the way into the end. But what you're looking for in counsel, what your goal is, whether you follow the one committee model, and some churches adopt that, and that's effective for them, particularly if they don't have enough people to build teams for the SBRC or the trustees or the finance or nominations team. You may not have enough people to do that, but you do have enough people to form a good, specialized, coordinated navigating committee, and that would work in the same way that church council would work in a large church. It brings the chairs of these respective teams together so that the chair represents each of these specialized areas of ministry. Um, and they're all thinking together, how are we complementing and reinforcing one another? That's what you want people to be aware of. When they come to council, you're thinking, how are we complementing and reinforcing one another? Now, Wesley was a genius when it came to organization. And I said last week that it is certainly not an overstatement to say that he was a pioneer of indexing and metrics and analytics and record keeping, and then interpreting those statistics in terms of the overall impact that those statistics would yield in terms of usable information, translatable into application. He did that, and he did it in a way that was innovative. But another thing that he did that was quite innovative was that he structured governance in terms of the way things operated. He took meticulous records. In terms of societies, classes, and bands, Wesley was a meticulous record keeper. And he knew that effectiveness rested on two things: specialization and coordination. And that's what you apply on church council, regardless of the size of your church. You could have a church with 20, you can have a church with 5,000, but you're going to operate in the same manner in terms of when you get into that navigating room on your ship, you are interested in how all of these specialized areas are coordinating with one another. How are we complementing and reinforcing one another? Now, Wesley, being the remarkable statistician that he was, it's a remarkable to me that he did all of this wide-ranging ministry outreach. He oversaw, this is what he oversaw. He oversaw free clinics throughout Great Britain. Did you know that? He opened and established free clinics throughout Great Britain. That's astounding to me. He also opened schools for poor children. A lot of people don't realize that he did that. A lot of people don't know that he also initiated micro loan funds. He initiated that too. He wrote a medical handbook that he entitled Primitive Physics. All of this, mind you, while he was riding over 250,000 miles by horseback, preaching over 40,000 sermons. It is well documented that Wesley preached 2 to 3 sermons a day. Where did he get the energy? All the way into his 80s. It's remarkable, really. But the only way that he knew that he could be effective, and again, he wasn't looking to be independent from the Anglican Church, but he was fostering a movement with the clinics, with the schools, with the micro loan funds, by publishing the Primitive Physic and circulating that into people's hands so that they would have ways in which they could nurse themselves, and they could be more aware of things that they could do to use preventive medicine, as it were. He wanted people to be healthy on the front end so that they could take preventive measures so that they would be able to cure a lot of their remedies to prevent illnesses from even occurring. So Primitive Physic is an interesting thing to read. And one of the interesting side notes I might tell you about is Wesley was also one of the innovators of shock therapy. Did you know that? Can you imagine him rounding up people off the streets and saying that he had something he wanted them to volunteer for. He was going to administer some shocks to them. And what he was interested in was to see how shock therapy could cure things like migraines, depression, anxiety. It's interesting that in primitive physics, he's talking about how uh, applying shock could perhaps have a way in which it could prevent some of these things. Wesley was a multifaceted thinker. And the only way he thought that these things could be effective, whether it was the clinics, the schools, the loans, is that it had to be meticulously structured. It had to be meticulously coordinated. And the only way that it could be successful was that it had to be specialized. And so he would bring these specialized areas together and he would coordinate them because all of it was for the mission. All of it was for the mission of social holiness and spreading scriptural holiness throughout the land. That's what it was all about. And so when we think of our own outreach, all the forms of it that your church does, all the multiple forms, whether you have 20 in your church, whether you have 1,000 in your church, makes no difference. You're looking for the balance of coordination and specialization. And that for Wesley was the secret of a success of any community, whether it was a society, class, a band, and certainly you can apply it now to parishes and congregations. By the time the church was taking hold in America, Wesley's idea and motivation, and it was quite he was quite ambitious. He wanted more churches in America than post offices. Isn't that something? He would say that's your signal. Go into any town and how depending on how many post offices were around, if there were 2 or 3, then that told you if there were 3, you had a minimum of 6 churches in that area. 1 post office, 2 churches. Your post offices was the anchor by which you took how many churches would be needed in that that early pioneer development in America. He was ambitious, and he knew that the only way to make it successful was that it had to be specialized and it had to be coordinated. So when you balance those 2 things together, that is what you are doing with church council. You are focusing and you are coordinating. Now, what is it that your church council representatives need to know more than anything? They need to know doctrine and they need to know social witness. Because what is it that we really are about in terms of church governance? Do you know what we're about? Do you know what our ultimate mission is? We are guardians of doctrine. That's what we're about. And for Wesley, the only way you can be social holiness and spreading scriptural holiness is that you have to be grounded in accurate doctrine. And so we're guardians of doctrine, whether you serve on council, whether you're on the SBRC, whether you're on finance, whether you're on trustees, as we're going to see in the weeks ahead. The question that we're asking in all of these roles is, in what part do I play to ensure that the community that I am in will preserve the integrity of doctrine? How will I contribute to that in the role that I have? How is what I am doing in the role that I have, whatever it may be, in worship, in education, in missions, in outreach, whatever that role is that serves in that navigation room, is you're asking, how am I a guardian of doctrine? How are we giving witness? How are we promoting it? How are we expressing it? How are we living up to it? How are we being true to it? How are we aligning our lives and our work with it? There is no holiness but social holiness. There is no work but spreading scriptural holiness for John Wesley. And he insisted on that on all levels. Regardless of whatever level you were on, It was structured, it was coordinated, it was specialized, and it was simplified because you knew what your purpose was. You knew what your ultimate aim was. And so whenever you went to your work, whether it was overseeing those schools that Wesley started, those free clinics, whether you were helping him with his loans that he helped establish, all of it ultimately was about spreading scriptural holiness and about being true to social holiness. How are we aligning ourselves to that? How are we preserving that? And how are we remaining connected with it? Now, in terms of the nuts and bolts, I will simply say this, that for Wesley, in terms of overseeing societies, classes, and bands, he had 4 rules, and you can apply them to council or any other committee for that matter. Do you know what the rules were? They were quite simple. Number 1, begin and end every meeting in prayer. I don't care what you're talking about. I don't care if it's your order of worship. I don't care if it's tweaking your outreach program. I don't care if it's evaluating the effectiveness of your children's education program. Whatever it is, you're beginning and ending in prayer. Number 2, you always have an agenda. Never go in and attempt to go off the cuff. Know what is at stake. Know what is the target of what you're hoping to reach. There's nothing more miserable to sit through than some gathering where nobody has an agenda of what they're doing there, and everybody just kind of talks in circles. You enter into whatever the plan and purpose is with a clear, defined agenda. Number 3, you respect people's time. I mean, think about it. You got people who are leading busy lives. You got people there who it was a lay mission for Wesley. He knew this. These people work. These people have lives. They have families. They have livelihoods. They have wives. They have children. They have people they've got to support. They have spouses. They have loved ones. I've got to respect their time. I'm going to be true to what we're about, and I'm going to respect the people who are giving me their time. It is going to be productive. It's going to be fruitful. It is going to have a purpose and a point. And we're going to know the minute we step into the room what this is about and what we're going to do to get there. Might not solve it all in one evening or in 1 minute or in one meeting, but you're at least going to respect people's time. And Wesley, he urged people respect it in such a way where you're going to be true to what the need is at the time. I mean, you may say that in this instance, maybe 1 hour will be sufficient. But if we got an instance where there's something at stake, it may need more than that. But be true to people's needs and respect their time. And lastly, focus on the vision. Always make sure that is always at the forefront of what you do. So that means that whatever the specialty might be, what coordinates it all is that it all has an ultimate goal or purpose that you're attempting to reach. And the question is, what does this specialty contribute to accomplishing that ultimate goal? How does it fit into it? How does it reinforce it? How does it contribute to the coordination of it? Wesley Society's classes and bands were effective because he applied those 4 guiding principles. And he believed that you keep it simple. And if you follow those 4 things, then in most cases, you're going to have a productive gathering. Your gatherings are not going to be fruitless. They're not going to be worthless. They're not going to be purposeless. They're going to be focused. They're going to be on target, and they're going to have an enrichment about it that at the end you will say, I'm glad I gave myself to that hour. I feel like we are better for it. Our church has clarity now that we didn't have before. We have conviction that we didn't have before. And for Wesley, the more you can clarify and the more that you can compel and the more that you can incite courage within people, you can call that a successful gathering. But to the extent that you weary people and it's dull and it's lacking of purpose and clarity, then you've done yourself a disservice. And at the end of the time, usually people are less sure than they were at the beginning. And in some cases, they may have entered hostile and may leave even more hostile. So Wesley believes you begin and end in prayer, grounded in God's spirit. Let God bathe the atmosphere. Follow what they did in Acts 2. Let that be your guide. Number two, always have a goal. Make sure it's clear. Make sure it's specified. Respect people's time. Know that the people who are invested in this have lives and that we're together in this mutual respect toward a purpose and toward a mission, but we're going to respect each other even as we accomplish that. And last but not least, the ultimate purpose of what we're about. We're spreading social holiness and we're spreading scriptural holiness throughout the land. You keep that at the forefront, you will ground your identity. And as I say, more important than knowing what to do is knowing who you are. Knowing who you are in your identity, in your calling, in your representation of who am I as a witness, who am I as a representative of this heritage and legacy that I stand in. When you begin to ground yourself in that scripturally and historically and theologically, it enriches your life. It really does. It deepens you because you realize that you sense the echoes going all the way back to the 18th century and know that Great Awakening is hearkening to us. We're going to plant ourselves in a very similar kind of spirit and foundation with similar dreams and similar expectations. And to know that the moment you're in is bigger when you view it that way. We're too sometimes we're too restrictive in thinking about only our time and our moment. If you begin to see this in a wider way, to think that I'm part of a heritage, I'm part of a legacy, I'm part of a lineage that I represent, and I want to carry it forward in a way that it has integrity. Uh, Inform people like that, deepen their awareness. And when they become more aware of the rich theological and historical lineage they're part of, it really does wonders in deepening your sense of when I'm gathered in this room, there's so much more that I bring with me in terms of my horizons. Um, I think bigger, I dream bigger, I expect bigger, and by default, I live bigger. And everybody wins when you become more enlarged in that respect. So that's why I say before you start training your people on what it is to be church council, have them train themselves, first of all, in what it means to be a Wesleyan. What does it mean to be Orthodox? What does it mean to be part of a legacy of believers that represent the kingdom of priests? Ground them in that first, and then begin to introduce them to what it means to be on church council, how we are in this navigation room together, how to think of what it means to be specialized and coordinated, and how all of these parts are like an engine contributing to the overall momentum of this thing charting a course. We're on an adventure, and this is what's going to navigate us and guide us. And when council can begin to see themselves like that and think of themselves like that, you will have an energized and ignited people. Well, more that I can say, but I'm going to leave it there and open it up to you. What questions do you have? Anything leap out at you in the presentation notes or in the Book of Doctrine and Discipline, if you read that, or something I might have said this evening that gripped you? What would you like to talk about tonight? We're going to open it up. Remember, first opportunity for our CLM candidates first, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. While you're thinking of your question, let me urge you as a church, if you aren't on church council, and maybe some of you aren't on church council, I hope you at least pray for your church council. Pray for them, support them. And if you're called to serve on church council, uh, I pray that you're going to be deepening your life with daily devotions, and know that the role that you represent is indeed a calling, a great calling, and one that we don't enter into lightly. And I think part of the reason that we noticed that some churches failed to disaffiliate and failed to, even though they said that they wanted to and wish they had, they just did not have people in these crucial navigational roles who were ready when they needed to be. It was for such a time as this, and they did not chart the course that their church needed. And if we're in these roles, we need to know that it is a high calling. It is a cherished calling. And so if you are not in that role, I pray that you're interceding for your church councils, praying for them daily, supporting them, encouraging them. And if you are nominated this year, then I pray that you enter into it prayerfully and with a great sense that what I'm getting ready to do will require the best of me and the highest that I can devote and dedicate myself to. Daniel, what's on your mind this evening, my friend?
Hey, Steve, this is James Swafford. I'm sitting here with Pastor Daniel, and we just had a question for you on church council membership, or really just to get your thoughts. So you mentioned, you ran through who would be on a church council, and it's at least 8 people you mentioned, which included the department chairs. Here at Farmville Methodist, we're big enough that we do have several members on each of those teams. We have 4 people, sometimes 5 people on finance, for example, several people on SPRC. All of those sit on our church council, not just the department chairs, the entire team, all of those teams. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, church dynamics are going to be what is effective for your congregational body, and what yields the highest fruit and return. And I know Dan and his leadership there, and I can speak for his wisdom. And he's a good friend of mine, and I think very highly of Dan. And your church is blessed to have him. And so I would say that there is a great deal of variety and ways in which you can structure this, and the Book of Discipline even invites that and gives room and measure for that, which I appreciate. You can have small councils, you can have large councils, but one thing that I think that it does attempt to balance is, again, specialization and coordination. And so there's nothing wrong with having multiple people from respective leadership committees, but you don't want to stack it too heavily in terms of, say, SPRC having the dominant voice, dominant vision over, say, other components, which may be equally as vital and equally as critical. And so that's what the discipline is aiming for. Not that your church is at fault in that. I'm just saying that what it tries to do is to balance specialization and coordination. And so whether you see that you may want to integrate or assimilate numerous people from that committee into council and get them all in the room thinking together, reflecting together, and the collective force of that, bears great fruit for you, then you have our blessing, and the Book of Discipline would say, go for it. But it is saying, as a standard, as a way to approach this on the front end, what it is attempting is to do what Wesley tried to do as he balanced all of his various ministries, is coordination and specialization, to make sure that all the respective parts are represented in a way to yield that right sort of equilibrium in a church, because churches have that beautiful equilibrium, and sometimes it can get a little out of harmony. It can be in disharmony when there is not that right equilibrium of coordination and specialization. So the discipline generally calls for representatives from each of these respective committees, and they can be as numerous roles as your churches have. I mean, you know, churches have various forms of outreach. They may have elderly outreach, they may have children's outreach, they may have youth outreach, and they can have roles for each and every one of those. But the real thing that you see is the force of the church council section of the Book of Doctrine and Discipline is coordination, specialization, aiming for a good distribution that represents your church well in terms of ages, in terms of male, female, in terms of styles of worship, in terms of I would even say the social economic. I mean, that's another area of church life where you get a lot of different diversity. I mean, even in our church, we've got people who are millionaires. We've got people who are fixed income. We need a church council that represents all those variables, and it is coordinated and specialized in a way that tries to strive for the utmost level of equilibrium that your church can attain. How you do that is open to variety. It's open to creativity and imagination. And probably no two churches are going to be exactly the same. But what the GMC tries to offer is that Wesleyan balance of specialization and coordination brought together in a way that yields that force when they're clicking on all cylinders, as the expression goes. When you get those things functioning right, then harmony is the result from it. But I don't think that there is any one set way, because the GMC doesn't want to straitjacket you and tell you this is the way it must be done. It does say that as a minimum, the council needs to strive for about 8 to have those core positions. Your SBRC, your lay leader at the annual conference. And by the way, somebody was talking earlier about how they discover things when they went to annual conference. I'm astounded at the way I go out and talk to churches, and they'll tell me they didn't attend annual conference. We've had 3 of them now. They said we haven't been to any of them. That cannot be, friends. We cannot become congregationalists. As Wesleyans, we are not congregationalists. And when we are not a part of this larger connection, we are really missing and disqualifying ourselves from the power that comes collectively when we are enjoined in the larger connection of who we are as a people. And that coordination and specialization works at every level. And for Wesley, that was the secret to its success, was that he called for that at every level, whether it is on the general conference level, annual conference level, charge conference level, localized congregation or parish level. At every level, coordination, specialization. And however your church works that out and finds that brilliant equilibrium, you have our blessing. If that's the way you do it, but just aim to ensure that you've got a nice representation collectively across your church life. And that really would be the goal. Did you have any more questions about that or along those lines?
I think you've answered it. Thank you, sir.
Dottie, what are you thinking this evening?
Well, I have a question for James. He doesn't have any more for us. I was just curious as to whether or not all these people that come to the church council, do they each get a vote, or is it only the chair of each individual committee that has a vote?
Yes, ma'am. We've they all vote. We have at last count, I think 17 voting members.
If the church, if the council collectively agrees that these professing members would be endowed with voting privilege, then they would have the voting privilege. You're going to see that much of what gets endorsed and sanctioned proceeds out of church council. And in fact, the standards that the SBRC will follow, those can be produced by church council as well. You will see that the SBRC has a great deal of authority that we will see next week that is empowers them, but church council does have the power to create standards through council that the SBRC will honor and align with. So council is really your navigational function in the ship. That is really the compass. That is what is steering this thing, guiding it. And what you sanction within that collective administrative authority, as council approves that, if you have 17 voting members, you have 17 voting members. But you would ensure that those 17 voting members represent a good collective expression of the congregation as a whole, whether they're 17 or 8 or 30, that they represent the entirety of the congregation. That's what you're aiming for.
Steve, I was just going to say that I've seen the case in the past where, because the council meetings are open to anyone to come, people who just drop in and have a passionate feel about whatever might be being discussed, sometimes don't understand that they don't have a vote, and
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
I think that it is important for the council to establish that, because I've turned around and seen in my own church, people raising their hand, voting for or against something, and they're not a voting member.
That's true. And when we looked at charge conference last week, one thing that we didn't mention is that the discipline makes a distinction between what is called a charge conference or a church conference. That's something I will allude to now. Thank you for suggesting that. The difference between a charge conference and a church conference is that you can invite a wider church participation, given that the people who are coming are professing GMC members, that is. And then that if it were a church conference, then those who are in attendance, whether they are on council or not, would have a voice and a vote. That's the difference between a charge conference and a church conference. And sometimes a church may have significant areas of concern, selling property or things like that, where you do want to invite the larger church in. That normally what represents charge conference is your council. Okay. And if you have something that is larger than that, then you would invite the general member in, and then they would have a voice if it were a specified, defined church conference. We allow people to visit our church council, but the church council chair always sets at the outset that only those who are seated council members will ultimately have vote. Now, other people can contribute, other people can have say, other people can raise issues, other people can express thoughts, other people can express yay or nay. But in the end, when the vote is called for, it would be those who are seated as defined voting members on church council. And as I say, in special instances where you have a church conference, those can be opened up to the wider membership of the church. And those would be things that they could vote on, even if they weren't on church council as such. But those are specific and they are very defined and only to very particular purposes that the presiding elder would know about and would sanction. But that would apply certainly to what we're talking about here is what instances would the wider church come in and have a vote? And there are instances where they do. But in most cases, they can contribute to a meeting, but they would not have the ultimate vote as a setting member of church council. So that's a good distinction to be aware of. And you would find the distinction about church council and charge conference and church conference under the sections dealing with charge conference that we talked about last week. That'd be worth looking at because there's a little section on that that's worth looking at if you need clarity on that. Did you have any other questions, Dottie, or did that get at it pretty good? Linda, what are you thinking about this evening? Is your audio on?
Are you talking to me?
There.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me,
Yeah,
Steve?
Linda. We sure can. Yes, we
I
can.
have a question. How do you bring your church council into the Wesleyan way when they where it says on here that council is not a place for ego, and it goes on to talk about how you don't come to debate and discern, you don't come to preserve the past, you come to the future. How do you bring them into that? Because let's just say a lot of our folks think this way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And we saw it during disaffiliation. We've seen it, soon after we formed as GMC. What we mean by that is we've seen so often, and I've seen it in my pastoral experience. I'm now at my 30 years of serving churches, and you see all different types of personalities that come into the navigation room. And sometimes when you get specialization, you get specialists who are specialists and they are not as much interested in the coordination, if you know what I mean. They're interested in their ministry and they're interested in what they represent. And we're back again to that leadership in not being aware of the grand scheme and not being aware of how your contribution fits into the larger purpose of what is happening. What we mean by that is that when a person comes in, they may very well have a heart and passion for their ministry, but there comes a point where we must ask about how that particular specialization fits into the larger coordination of the church as a whole. And sometimes there may be a case where we are feeding into a certain specialization that is counterproductive, and it is not fruitful, and it is not cost effective, and it is a drain on other aspects of the church. And I've seen it before in terms of ways that people will come to the council room and they will ask for increase in their budget line, and in the way that that will be decided in the next year when the budget takes shape. And various people will come in. They say, we all want more for this ministry, whatever it might be, VBS, children's ministry, youth ministry, three of the more popular ones. And they're going to say, we want this increased. We want, a mission trip this year. We want to do a retreat this year. We want to take the kids on an excursion or an adventure. Well, it may be ambitious, and it may on the face of it be good intentions. I mean, the person who's putting this forward may have good intentions, but then we may need to look at the overall coordination of the church as a whole and ask that, in spite of this particular specialization, do you know how you fit into the overarching coordination of the church as a whole? I mean, we may be at a point here where we may have to evaluate the effectiveness of what we're doing. Maybe we tried to do this 3 years in a row, 5 years in a row, and it cost us a lot of money and it yielded little results. I mean, one thing that council does is it's a place where ministries are evaluated. We ask the tough questions. We ask the tough questions and we ask, is this destination that we have pinpointed, is it a worthy destination? Because we may need to reevaluate this direction. We may need to reevaluate whether we want to put this much effort and energy into this, because 3 years running, it hasn't yielded fruit, and it is draining from other things that we need to be doing. And so council is that place where egos have to be checked at the door. And I may very well have a heart for children's ministry, VBS, youth, what have you. But I've got to balance what I bring to that with the overall mission of the church, to know that specialization is one thing, coordination is another. Maybe I have a heart for this, but is it something the church can do without draining its overall mission as a totality? You see, and that's what we mean by that, because, and we've seen it through the years, and we've seen it in a number of different ways, where people will have a favorite project, a favorite thing that the church does, and yet, even though they may enjoy it, may have a heart for it, it may not be effective anymore. It may not be producing fruit anymore. And even though that person may very well have a passion for it, we ask the tough questions in council: is this specialization reinforcing coordination? Or is it undercutting it, or in some way reducing it, or maybe even being contrary to it? Those tough questions aren't always easy. And that's where council comes into play, and having that right balance. You're able to see level-headedness in discussion, where people can look at things from an objective point of view, where sometimes passion can be somewhat blurring in terms of one's overall focus. And I see through narrow tunnel vision and fail to see the bigger picture. So that's why I say council, you can have a passion for all these various forms of ministry, and you need them all. You need your worship, evangelism, mission, stewardship, education, children's, youth, all of them. But all of them, when they come, have to realize I'm bringing my passion for specialization, but I'm also bringing a realization for the coordination of the overall ministry. Is there something I might be pushing for that could be a drain on other aspects that are equally as important and carry as much vitality? And we've got to balance that. And so to make sure that we're balancing things rather than doing things out of proportion. It's always something that's dynamic. I don't know if there's ever something that you can look at and say it's a formula, because there isn't, but there is a dynamic. And when you get spirit-filled people in a room who are really surrendered, really attuned and attentive to the Holy Spirit, then you can see results sometimes, even when you leave and you're thinking, I had to make some compromises back there. I had to lay my passion on the altar, but I know it was the wise thing to do. And I know that in the overall interest of where we are presently, it was the right thing to do. And maybe next year, maybe as we move in the future, maybe some of my passions will come to full fruition. But there may be a time where the seed has to germinate. And a lot of times we plant things and we want things immediately. We want the orchard, when it might be time to water. It might be time to nurture. And sometimes you got to tell children's leaders and youth leaders and VBS leaders, look, it's not time for your ministry to reap a harvest right now. You're not at the orchard stage. You're at the germinating stage. We're going to help you water. We're going to help you. We're going to help you till. We're going to help you prune. But the orchard stage is not quite there yet. And to try to produce an orchard with you is going to choke out other people's ministries, which are equally as vital and equally as critical for our overall outreach. So it's a system of checks and balances, which is what council is designed to do, which is why Wesley created the governance that he did. You're organizing it and structuring it, and you're creating checks and balances so that we can look lovingly over each other's shoulders. It's good to have passion, and you want to cultivate that and encourage it. But it's also important to make sure that that fire is not only stoked, but it is also managed, because fire that is managed can heat a house. Fire that's unmanaged will burn the house down. So that's why you got to manage passion. It's
Right.
it's got to be rightly steered and rightly bridled. Otherwise, it can level a community if it's not rightly managed in the right way. That's what I meant by that. I think I might expand on that a little more in the future on that particular illustration. But it is certainly not, in my own 30 years of experience, I've seen council is not the place for egos. And we all have hearts for what we do. But when we come together, we have got to balance that. We really do. And that was Wesley's wisdom. It was balancing that specialization with coordination, and you yield and you produce greater power when you do that for the totality. And sometimes it may mean that each individual makes a series of compromises so the entirety can be stronger as a totality. Does that answer your question, or did you have another or a follow-up?
No, very much. No, it does answer my question very much so, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Yeah, as we said last week, with all, Wesley classified all of these various branches as Christian conferencing. And so you have a Christian conference when you enter into the navigational room, just as much as you did when we talked last week about charge conference. When you enter into that council room, you're entering into that means of grace where it's formational and it's transformational. And when you get people who are mature spiritually in the same room together, uh, you end up coming out stronger spiritually as a group. And it's iron sharpening iron. And I might say, I went in and not all of my passion was really authentic Christian passion. Some of it was more, Steve leads this ministry and Steve wants to see it succeed. So Steve will be associated with success. I mean, there was a personal element that I brought to it that I will realize after discussion and reflection and collective illumination that I've got to check some of my own personal ambitions and aspirations at the door and say, Lord, in your good time. Right now, I might be influencing the cupbearer and the baker. There's going to come a time where I will be on the throne, but right now, I'm managing the cupbearer and the baker. Help me to be satisfied with that for now. It takes a lot of humility to lead like Joseph did, because we want to go straight to the throne room. And when I'm sensing that, I've got to cross check myself. And it helps to have loving, wise people in the room providing cross checks and balances that help me to evaluate, Steve, is your passion authentic, or is some of it maybe personally infused that you need to hold a bridle to? And sometimes churches can benefit from that. They really can. Joyce, what are you
Thank
thinking
you.
this evening? What's on your mind? Is your audio on, Joyce? Let's see. Joyce might be having some trouble finding her audio.
There you are. You can hear me now.
We can hear you and see you. Yes.
Okay. Question I had is, do you have any guidance on how to get the board or your council members on board with thinking? Our pastor has been very much in encouraging us with everything we have done in the past and what we attempt to do in the future to, through prayer and discernment, make decisions. And yet I don't feel like everybody's at that point. So
Well, that is
easy
good.
to do
And
what you've been doing.
it is. You get in those routines and they are easy to to accommodate to. I've often said to my own congregation that often the greatest obstacle to faith is not fear, even though it's often stated that way. The greatest obstacle to faith is the familiar. And we find ourselves reverting back to that time and again because it just is the convenient and comfortable thing we slip and slide into. But I think, as we've alluded to already earlier in the last session, I think that the greatest campaign in your church, not necessarily from the pastor, comes from a grassroots campaign from people like you, who are able to go and remind their people of Proverbs 11:14, where there is no guidance, people fail, but an abundance of counselors, there is safety. Abundance of counselors, not in just a few, not in a minority, but an abundance of them, and they're striving for harmony and striving to speak with one spirit. As we said last week with that passage in Acts 15, it was good to the spirit and to us. Now, that's a people that surrender to what the spirit is guiding and listening to what the spirit is saying to the churches rather than our familiar and our own customs and our own patterns and our own routines. So I think a grassroots effort, sometimes it may take time, but you're looking at something organic. I have found that what doesn't work is when a pastor tries to superimpose it. Um, we have found that we've seen that history of nation building. That's why it's very difficult when you go in and you try to superimpose democracy on a place. It's sometimes very difficult to do because it's got to rise up organically. It's got to rise up from within. And if it's superimposed, it will never seem to bear fruition because it has to arise organically. So if it's a grassroots movement with wise people such as yourself going in, representing it, giving expression to it, just showing through joyful action that this really is it is spiritually exhilarating when you give yourself to it. It really is freeing and renewing. Wesley was right. It's forming and transforming when we are striving to align ourselves in this way. It is not going to be something that might happen quickly, but I do think people can stay encouraged to know that that grassroots effort will bear impact. It's like that trickle of water that eventually becomes a Grand Canyon. It may happen as a trickle, but the spirit just has a wonderful way in which what seems to be a trickle ends up being a mighty rushing river before it's over. Um, so be encouraged, be that voice of grassroots expression. Uh, it has a way of being more impactful than it would coming from a pastor because it's not superimposed, it's rising up organically. And I have found that that's always more effective uh, when people such as yourself are the channels of it.
That's good.
Well, do we have any more? You have been a lively and active group tonight. Thank you for these engaging questions. That's really what makes this so worthwhile and so productive. I say what's on my mind, but it's these questions I didn't expect that you ask that really takes us places that really compound our time together. And I'm grateful for that. You have multiplied this 100-fold for us. Are there any others before we sign off this evening and dismiss for this week? Going once, going twice. You've been a joy this evening. I am going to ask my dear friend, is Lisa still with us this evening? Lisa Judd, are you still with us? Or did she have to sign off? She may have had to sign off. I was going to let her send us forth with a blessing. Dottie, are you still with us this evening?
I am, and I'll be happy to.
Give us a blessing as we go forth tonight.
Our Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for these courses and a way to ask our questions about how and why we do what we do in our churches. We ask that you bless each and every person who is involved in church leadership. Be with them as they continue to try to become more Wesleyan in their ways, and encourage the rest of the church to do that also. We ask that you be with each person as they go this week their separate ways, and encourage them to follow your path and become closer to you. I ask this in the name of your Son. Amen.
Oh man. Well, next week, what's on tap will be for us the what is the church nominations committee and what is SBRC. And then we'll round it out 2 weeks from tonight with what is finance, what is trustees. We'll continue to saturate this in distinctive Wesleyan identity so that you can not only know what to think, but how and who you are as you think. That's what we're really interested in, is framing and cultivating that outlook that you bring with it as you come to these tasks. I will send you the link for the recordings of tonight, tomorrow, and I will also send you the readings for next week, as well as the Zoom link for next week. Be blessed, friends. I will look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir. Bye.